The studio lights were hotter than usual. Or maybe it was the tension. Either way, the air inside the Capitol Forum stage felt electric before a single word was spoken. The episode had been promoted all week: 2 Americas, 1 stage, a conversation between Senator JD Vance and Denzel Washington. Except everyone knew this wouldn't be a conversation. It was bound to be a collision. JD Vance sat tall in his chair, conservative blue suit pressed sharp, the American flag pin gleaming under the lights. He looked like the system had carved him perfectly from marble. Denzel, by contrast, wore a black blazer over an open-collar shirt, posture relaxed but eyes razor-sharp. He wasn't there for show. He was there for truth. The moderator, Dana Marshall, gave the usual opening, welcoming viewers across the country. "Tonight," she said, "we're bringing together 2 powerful voices to talk about who really speaks for the American people. Is it the politician who rose from poverty into office? Or the citizen who spent decades calling out the system from the outside?" From the moment Denzel spoke his first sentence, the air changed. "I didn't come here to sell a slogan," he said. "And I'm not here to play nice with power. I'm here to ask why so many of us feel forgotten, in a country that never shuts up about freedom." Vance smirked, clearly prepared. "With all due respect, Mr. Washington, the people you claim to defend, they elected people like me. They chose our vision. Maybe what you call forgotten is just disagreement." Denzel didn't flinch. Or maybe they didn't have another option. Maybe they were handed fear and told it was faith. The crowd murmured. Dana leaned forward. "Senator Vance, how do you respond to the idea that fear, not hope, is fueling modern politics?" Vance chuckled, trying to stay composed. "Hope isn't handed out by Hollywood speeches. It's built through responsibility, through work, family, and tradition. Not hashtags." Denzel's jaw tightened. Not with anger, but with focus. "You talk about tradition," he said. "I come from a tradition too. One that fought to be counted in a system built to erase us. So don't tell me hashtags are the problem. Maybe they're just the flare guns people use when no one's listening." Dana blinked. That wasn't in the prep notes. And just like that, the gloves were off. J.D. Vance leaned forward, both hands gripping the edges of his chair. "You talk like you're the only one who's seen struggle," he said, his voice sharpened. "But let's not pretend you speak for all Americans. I grew up in a broken home too. I've lived through poverty. The difference is, I didn't let it turn me bitter." Denzel tilted his head slightly, absorbing the words without reaction. Then, with quiet precision, he replied, "It's not bitterness. It's memory. There's a difference." The audience fell silent again. "You turned your story into a campaign," Denzel continued. "I carried mine through silence, through neighborhoods nobody cameras ever visit. You wrote a book. I buried friends." The weight of that line hung in the room like smoke. Vance blinked, unsure whether to strike back or pause. Dana jumped in, hoping to cool the air. "Gentlemen, this is emotional territory," she said, glancing between them. "But maybe the question we need to ask is, who defines the American experience? Is it hardship, success, or how we use our voice afterward?" Denzel didn't wait for permission. "It's about how you treat people who don't clap for you." That line cut clean. The audience stirred, phones raised again. Online, the moment would be clipped and replayed in minutes. Vance exhaled sharply. "You want to imply I don't care about people? I've pushed for economic revitalization across Appalachia. I've passed legislation to bring jobs back. I don't see your name on any of those bills." "I'm not here to sign bills," Denzel shot back. "I'm here to ask why the same people you claim to help are still sleeping in their cars. You talk economy. I talk dignity." Dana's eyes widened. "That's a bold claim." "It's a bold reality," Denzel said. Vance straightened, defensive now. "And what do you offer? Speeches? Emotions? Theatrics?" That's not how we fix things. No, Denzel said, voice low but clear. But ignoring the human cost isn't how we fix things either. He didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. Because sometimes, the quietest words carry the hardest truths. Senator Vance scoffed, shifting in his seat. You frame this like it's a morality contest, he said. But policy isn't poetry. It's hard choices. It's compromise. It's doing what's necessary even when it doesn't please everyone. Denzel leaned forward slightly, eyes locked. Necessary for who? He asked. Because from where I'm sitting, those hard choices always seem to fall on the same people. The single mother working 2 jobs. The kid dodging potholes and bullets on the way to school. The veteran living out of a storage unit. You call that collateral. I call that a warning sign. The studio tensed again. Dana didn't interrupt. She knew the moment had found its own rhythm. People don't need lectures about compromise, Denzel went on. They need someone to stop trading their future for talking points. You keep saying, we have to make tough decisions, but when was the last time one of those decisions touched you? That hit. For a moment, even Vance looked shaken. His jaw tightened, but he steadied his voice. You think you're the only one who's paid a price? I gave up a lot to serve. To stand up for the forgotten communities you like to claim as your audience. Denzel nodded slowly. Then act like it. The room shifted again. Vance raised a brow. Excuse me? If you really speak for them, Denzel said calmly, then stop speaking at them. Stop turning their pain into a ladder you climb. You don't need to be the hero in every story. Sometimes, you just need to listen. There was a hush. Not the silence of discomfort, something more deliberate. The audience wasn't zoning out. They were leaning in. Dana finally stepped in. This is becoming a masterclass in 2 very different kinds of leadership. Mr. Washington, are you suggesting that emotional truth has more weight than legislative power? Denzel looked directly at the camera. I'm saying leadership without compassion isn't leadership. It's management. And America doesn't need more managers. It needs people who remember what pain feels like, and aren't afraid to name it. He sat back. The moment stretched. And just like that, it wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. Vance crossed his arms, biting down the urge to interrupt. But the audience's eyes weren't on him, they were locked onto Denzel, who had just shifted the tone of the room with a few carefully chosen words. Dana turned to Vance. Senator, your response. He smiled, thin and practiced. It's easy to moralize when you don't have to make policy. When you're not the one voting on tax bills or sitting in front of angry constituents who just lost their jobs. I get it, Mr. Washington has a powerful voice. But passion doesn't pay rent. Emotion doesn't fix inflation. Denzel didn't flinch. Neither does detachment. That landed hard. I've been in rooms with economists, Denzel added. And I've been in rooms with grieving mothers. Guess which one taught me more about the soul of this country? Vance leaned forward. You want to talk about the soul of America? I've knocked on doors in Ohio. I've sat at dinner tables with laid-off factory workers and struggling farmers. Don't tell me I don't know pain. I'm not questioning your experience, Denzel said. I'm questioning your memory. Because somewhere between that dinner table and that Senate seat, you started talking like pain was a tool instead of a truth. Dana held up a hand, but no one wanted her to stop this. Vance narrowed his eyes. You're accusing me of using people? I'm saying when your story becomes a brand, it stops being real, Denzel replied, voice steady. You sold a memoir. I kept mine private, not because it wasn't worth telling, but because it wasn't finished. Because the people I speak for are still living in chapters no one wants to read. The room held its breath. One woman in the second row nodded, visibly moved. Online, the chat feed exploded, he's not playing. This is real. Vance just got exposed. Dana finally spoke, more softly this time. Senator Vance, does your platform risk losing touch with the people you started out defending? Vance glanced at the crowd, the cameras, then back to Denzel. I started this journey to give voice to the forgotten, he said. But I won't apologize for succeeding. I won't apologize for moving forward. Denzel nodded. Neither will I. But I also won't forget the ones who are still stuck in the same place we left them. The audience applauded, not wildly, but with gravity. It wasn't showmanship. It was sincerity. Dana looked between them, sensing the gravity thickening. This wasn't just policy now, it was two visions of America colliding. One rooted in survival, the other in structure. And only one of them felt like it had blood on it. She cleared her throat. Let's shift slightly. Senator Vance, many of your critics say your alignment with certain corporate interests contradicts your message of fighting for the working class. How do you respond? Vance straightened. I work with companies because I want jobs to come back to places like Dayton, like Youngstown. I don't demonize opportunity, I negotiate with it. That's the real world. Denzel's head tilted slightly, like he was measuring the words. Then he leaned in. You don't negotiate with a machine that's chewing people up, he said. You unplug it. There was a hush again. You think those communities need a handshake with Wall Street? Denzel continued. They need clean water. They need schools that don't have rats. They need doctors who stay longer than 6 months. And every time you show up smiling next to a billionaire who's never missed a meal, you're telling them survival isn't the priority, optics are. Vance looked irritated now. You think shouting about injustice is more useful than solving it? I think pretending injustice is a narrative problem, is why nothing changes, Denzel shot back. The studio lights felt hotter. Dana interjected. Gentlemen, But Denzel kept going. Look, I get it. You're in the room now. The rooms you dreamed of. You wear the suit, speak the language, and call it progress. But the people you left behind, they're not in those rooms. And they sure as hell aren't on those donor calls. Vance's voice hardened. That's rich coming from a man who's spent more time in Hollywood than in Harlan County. I've spent more time listening than most of Congress, Denzel replied. I've seen more pain in a month than some of y'all acknowledge in a lifetime. Don't confuse location with commitment. A soft murmur ran through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but engaged. Then Denzel dropped his tone a notch, lower, heavier. You know what separates me from you, Senator? You market pain. I remember it. And for the first time, Vance had no comeback. Dana paused, lips parted, waiting. But nothing came. The silence was electric. Vance adjusted his jacket, buying seconds, but the pause had already spoken louder than any defense. Dana turned to him gently, Senator, would you like to respond? He forced a smile. Look, I respect Mr. Washington's passion. But I also respect results. I passed legislation that helped veterans find housing, expanded broadband in rural towns, and brought investment into places left for dead by both parties. Denzel nodded slowly. That's commendable. But don't mistake movement for direction. Vance raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You're busy, no doubt, Denzel said. But being busy and being useful aren't the same. A storm moves a lot, it doesn't mean it's building anything. That landed hard. Denzel leaned back in his chair, letting it settle. Vance's jaw flexed. You talk a lot about community, Mr. Washington, but do you ever wonder if all this rhetoric convinces people they're powerless? That all they can do is point fingers and wait for the system to change itself? No, Denzel replied plainly. Because I tell them the opposite. That they matter. That they're more than a ballot or a bumper sticker. I tell them the truth, even when it doesn't come with applause. Dana looked impressed, even as she tried to stay neutral. Senator, is there truth in what he's saying? Vance exhaled. There's always some truth in anger. But truth without accountability? That's just theater. Denzel's tone cooled. Then maybe more of our leaders should stop acting. A few gasps rippled across the room. Someone online typed, Denzel just disarmed him without raising his voice. Vance turned defensive. You speak like the system is a monolith, like every person in office is a villain. I speak like someone who's watched the same system give promises to cemeteries, Denzel said. It's not about demonizing people. It's about recognizing patterns. If the house burns every year, maybe it's not the matches, it's the blueprint. The audience broke into subdued applause. This wasn't cheering, it was reckoning. Dana hesitated before asking the next question. So what now? If we accept that pain has been politicized, commodified, and weaponized, where do we go from here? Denzel didn't blink. We stop selling it. We start sitting with it. He looked toward Vance, not with contempt, but with disappointment. You want to represent the people? Learn to hear them before they scream. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. The moderator's voice barely echoed over the crackling static of what had just unfolded. JD Vance adjusted his tie, visibly rattled, though trying not to show it. Denzel stood firm, hands relaxed, but eyes locked in. There was no posturing now, just two men, two ideologies, and an entire nation leaning forward to watch. You see charts, Denzel said, his voice low but deliberate. I see mothers with 2 jobs and no time to breathe. You see tax brackets. I see a 9-year-old trying to do homework by flashlight because his family can't pay the power bill. Vance stepped in quickly. And I see a country that collapses if we base every policy on emotion and anecdotes. We need structure. We need math. It's not cruel, it's responsible. Denzel tilted his head. No, it's cold, he replied. And if responsibility requires abandoning compassion, then maybe we need to redefine responsibility. The audience buzzed, unsure whether to applaud or recoil. But Denzel didn't wait. I've visited your state, Senator. You talk about values while families trade prescription pills to survive. You praise grit, but ignore the grief. That's not fair, Vance tried. It's not supposed to be, Denzel cut in. Because life out there isn't fair. And it sure as hell doesn't get better when people in power pretend hardship is just a mindset. The moderator finally raised her hand, trying to regain control. Let's. But Denzel pressed on. The real divide in this country isn't left or right. It's those who feel the pain and those who find a way to explain it away. I'm tired of listening to speeches about opportunity from people who've never missed a meal. There it was. A hush fell. The cameras zoomed in, but even they couldn't capture the weight in the room. Vance lowered his gaze. Denzel didn't gloat. He just exhaled. I'm not here for applause, he said. I'm here to remind us who we've stopped fighting for. For several seconds, the room was wrapped in silence. It wasn't awkward, it was weighty. JD Vance shifted his posture, trying to reclaim footing. The cameras stayed tight on their faces, but nothing could soften the contrast. One man stood rooted in lived experience, the other, suddenly, looked like he was calculating a rebuttal that wouldn't land. Vance finally spoke. I'm not denying struggle exists, he said, voice more measured now. But policies aren't meant to hug people, they're meant to help them build stability. Denzel nodded, not dismissing but not conceding either. And when's the last time you checked whether those policies were working for the people you don't take photo ops with? The crowd stirred again. JD paused, eyes narrowing slightly. You talk like you're the only one who's seen hardship. I talk like someone who never forgot it, Denzel shot back. That line hit hard. Even the moderator blinked. Denzel took a step forward, not aggressive, but intentional. You think this is about left or right? It's not. It's about how power treats people once the cameras shut off. You say structure matters. Fine. But who gets to build it? Because for decades, it's been built without us at the table. Vance's voice rose, but not in anger, more in desperation to regain the narrative. "We're doing what we can." "Doing what you can," Denzel interrupted, "isn't enough when the people who need you the most don't even feel seen. This isn't about sound bites. This is about soul." The moderator finally interjected, trying to steer the program back to its intended questions. "Gentlemen, let's transition to the next segment." But the energy in the room wasn't ready to move on. The audience was locked in, not for spectacle, but for truth. Something rare had cracked through the polished veneer of modern political theater. Denzel didn't speak again. He let his words hang in the space, like a mirror no one wanted to look into. Vance stared ahead, jaw clenched slightly, then glanced toward the moderator and gave a tight nod. But for the first time in the debate, it wasn't Vance's nod that set the tone, it was Denzel's silence. The show's producers scrambled behind the scenes. They had expected strong opinions, maybe even some sparks, but this was something else entirely. The control room went quiet. The moderator glanced nervously at the clock. And yet, neither Denzel nor Vance had moved from their verbal standoff. The moment still pulsed. Then someone in the audience stood up. A man, maybe late 40s, weathered face, Union jacket. He didn't yell. He didn't wave. He just spoke. "I work 2 jobs," he said. "One for benefits, one for rent. And I came here tonight thinking Vance would speak for people like me. But the only one who did, was him." He pointed at Denzel. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Vance's eyes widened. Denzel didn't move, but his gaze briefly met the man's, just a nod. Respect, not victory. The moderator was frozen. The cameras caught it all. Then another voice, this time from the back. A woman in medical scrubs. "I voted for you, Senator," she called to Vance. "But tonight, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. Someone talking to us, not about us." The dam had cracked. Not a standing ovation. Not a protest. Just truth pouring out in human voices. JD Vance straightened his back and leaned into his mic. "Look, I've spent my life trying to climb out of hard places too," he said. "I wrote a book about it. I went into politics because I wanted to fix it. But I admit, somewhere along the way, maybe I started speaking more to the institutions than to the people." There it was, the first flicker of real reflection. Denzel didn't pounce. He didn't need to. He simply stepped forward again, not toward Vance, but toward the crowd. "It's not about who wins the mic," he said quietly. "It's about who uses it to carry someone else's voice." And for once, the division didn't feel like a chasm. It felt like a reckoning. Backstage, the producer whispered into her headset. "Do not cut to commercial." People watching from their living rooms weren't scrolling anymore. They were leaning forward, some in disbelief, others in quiet gratitude. Denzel finished with one line, "Real leadership isn't loud. It's honest." And then he stepped back, not to retreat, but to listen. The lights didn't feel as blinding now. The room, still packed, had gone through something more than debate. It felt like something broke open, and not just inside the walls of that auditorium, but through the screens watching from every corner of the country. The moderator, trying to compose herself, finally spoke. "That concludes our scheduled debate topics, but clearly, something larger was addressed tonight." JD Vance, looking more human than politician now, shifted in his seat. "You know," he said into the mic, "I came here to talk policy, taxes, jobs, the usual. But I didn't realize I'd be confronted by my own distance." He turned to Denzel, not smiling, not defensive. "Maybe we need more voices like yours in these rooms." Denzel nodded once. "Not my voice," he replied. "Just more voices that aren't echoes." The crowd didn't erupt, they breathed. Some leaned back, some wiped their eyes, others simply sat still, absorbing. The broadcast was supposed to end at the top of the hour, but no one cut the feed. Newsrooms across the country began rewriting headlines in real time. "Vance and Washington spark raw political moment," read one cheerin'. "Truth cuts through talking points," read another. Later that night, on social media, a clip of Denzel's line, "It's not about who wins the mic, it's about who uses it to carry someone else's voice," hit 2 million views in under an hour. Even those who disagreed with him politically couldn't deny what happened felt rare. Authentic. Undeniable. And at a diner 2 blocks from the event, a group of strangers who had come from different sides of the political spectrum sat at the same table, not to argue, but to talk. "We needed that," one woman said. "I didn't even know how much until he said it." Backstage, Denzel packed his notes. No entourage, no celebration. Just a quiet exit. JD Vance approached. "Listen," he began, "I may push back again next time. But I won't forget tonight." Denzel extended his hand. Then maybe it wasn't a waste. They shook, brief but real. As Denzel stepped out into the night, his team caught up. "You ready for the flood tomorrow?" Ruben asked, holding his phone up with dozens of unread notifications. "I'm ready for people to ask better questions," Denzel replied. "Even if they don't like my answers." The car door shut. The cameras didn't follow. But the echo of that night did. Not because it was perfect. But because, for once, someone stopped performing, and started speaking.